in my blood and it's in my bones, in my heart and it's in my soul. And when I'm gone, I hope you'll understand. When I get home, I will make amends. When Tuesday comes, I'll be gone again.
Hey everyone, Ryan here for Ryan Collins Fishing. So it's been a little bit since I've made a video, but now that I only got about 3 weeks of school left, so now that I'm getting towards the end of that, I should have a lot more videos coming up. Like I said in one of my last videos, I got a lot of big things planned, so I'm looking forward to that. So actually this video is going to be a kind of tips, techniques, rundown video on pre-spawn bass fishing here in Kentucky. You know, it really hasn't hit 60 degrees during the day. It's averaging in the mid 40s. We actually got snow like the past 2 days and everything like that. So still in that pre-spawn area here at the end of March. I've had a couple tournaments the past 2 weeks. Went to Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri, and water temp there was in the 40s, low 40s, 44, mid 40s. And then the next weekend I had one on Patoka Lake in southern Indiana, and the water temp there was low 40s, 43, 44. So still around this area, Midwest, where I'm at, you know, it's still pre-spawn. They're not quite looking up to move up and start their, actual spawning stage yet. I know some of you guys may be watching this in the south and water temps in the 60s, maybe even in the 50s and 60s. You know, that's going to be, you're looking more at the spawn there. But, from about Kentucky up, it's still in the 40s. May reach low 50s on some of these warmer days, but it's not going to be steady enough for them to actually go ahead and make that move and to start spawning. So, Otro Jano, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, he commented on my giveaway winning video and asked me to do some product reviews on some good pre-spawn early spring bass fishing lures. So sorry that's taking a little bit longer, but like I said, I've been busy with tournaments and everything. But so that's pretty much what sparked this video. Was wanted to give you guys a rundown on how I go about fishing in the pre-spawn and what I look for and what I'd be throwing and what I'd be targeting on. So I'm going to break this up in a little different segments. So we'll be talking about where I'm going to start. We'll kind of do it from where I start, what I'm looking for, breaking it down to what I'll be fishing. So stay tuned, and we'll be going over what I look for on the lake. Okay, so what I've done here is I went to Google and pulled up a random topo map. This is of Seneca Lake. Never been on the lake or anything, just to give you guys a rough idea of what I would start out doing when I first find out I'm going to the lake, and I kind of know it's going to be in that pre-spawn stage. So let's go ahead and get started here. If we zoom in here, there's a couple things that stand out to me right away. This north end of this lake is almost prime example for pre-spawn and spawning patterns. When I know it's going to be a pre-spawn pattern, there's some major things you want to look for. You want to find, first off, the spawning flats. As you can see here up at the north end, where this 3 foot and 6 foot of water is, that's almost perfect, especially back in these coves here and then the pockets to the left hand side. You can almost guarantee that's where they're going to be spawning, is in that shallow water in the pockets and creeks. And they're generally going to be in the back of those pockets in the creeks. So when pre-spawn comes, what these fish are doing is they're starting from the deep water, and they're going to start moving slowly up into the staging areas into when they're getting ready to move up and spawn. So what I do is I look for where they're going to be spawning at. So you have this creek to the right, the creek in the middle, and then these pockets to the left. Now when you find those spawning areas, the next thing you want to look for is where the closest, deepest water is. So as you can see here on this left hand side, you have 12 to 15, 18 foot of water on the points of these creeks and on this main creek stretch here. That's mainly where I'm going to be starting out, is on these points and secondary points of these spawning creeks and spawning pockets. That's prime area for those fish to come out of that deep water and stage before they make that final push into the back of those pockets. Moving just a little south on this lake, you'll find another area that looks almost identical to this spawning area that's almost going to be perfect for that pre-spawn pattern. Looking at this area, there's little things a little bit different that stands out to me. As you can see on the north end of this creek, you have those longer pockets than on that south side with that shallow water back in there, but you still have that 6, 9, and 12 foot of water in the middle of that creek with the creek channel running right through the center. Now, a little bit early in the pre-spawn, I might start out on the main creek, or the main point of this creek here, and even maybe to the left in these little secondary points off this main lake where you can see those tight contour lines, which means it's deeper water there and it's going to drop off real quick. So a little bit earlier in the pre-spawn, that's probably where I'm going to start and make my way back into the creek and see just how far back these fish have started. Maybe hitting a couple of those main points there and secondary points inside the spawning area to find out just where those fish are staging at. That is why pre-fishing is so important in tournaments, is going out there and seeing where those fish are at and where they're staging, because everywhere in the country is different at a different time of year. Now that lake was a little small. I think up there on the right hand side it said it was only about 3,500 acres. So 3,500 acre lake is pretty small. But as you can see, what I found on that lake is typical pre-spawn and spawning patterns. Now obviously when you get into those bigger lakes, 12, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 acre lakes, you're going to be able to duplicate those spots and find a lot more spots just like that. So now you've seen what I do when I've kind of looked at the topo map and when I'm making my trip there, kind of what I'm looking for. When I get on the lake, I'm going to start at those spots. Like I said, fish around those areas and find out just where those fish are holding. So next we're going to talk about what I'm going to be using when I get to the lake and I'm looking for those staging fish. Okay, so now that we've gotten to the lake and we're on the water and we're at those spots we found the day before or the night of, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my search bait. When I get to those spots, I'm looking for those active fish to let me know that they're there. Best thing to have that there is a crankbait. Here we have an Imalures Beast Hunter. This is a deeper diving crankbait. It's going to go about 12 foot. In those deeper areas, 12 foot is a good place to start. If it's a little bit shallower of a lake, then I'm going to go with the Pinjack 200, which dives about 6 feet. So I'm looking for a crankbait. Even a square bill is a good idea if you're up on that bank. So crankbait, square bill, medium diver, deep diver, cover those depth ranges until you find those active fish. Now once you've found those active fish with a crankbait, there's a couple important things you want to do. There's one thing I forgot to mention on that crankbait is I'm going to throw one that this water temp is still in the low 40s, mid 40s, so the fish are not going to be super aggressive, and neither are the shad. You're trying to imitate as much natural as you can. Those shad aren't going around hunting with the hunting action, so I'm going to be looking for a tight, wobbling crankbait. A good example of that is like a Spro Lil John MD, which is a medium diver. It goes about 7 to 9 feet. The flat-sided crankbait is one of the best lures you can throw in cold water to trigger those active fish. So, cover those depth ranges with the crankbait, find those active fish. Once I found those active fish, I'm going to slow down now that I know that there's fish in that area. So I'm going to slow down, and there's two main lures that I'm going to throw when I find those fish and I know there's fish holding there. Number one I'm going to throw in this cold water is a jerkbait. Here, this is a Smithwick Rogue jerkbait, one of the best jerkbaits for cold water. This is, a bunch of guys were using this one in the Classic, Jason Christie and a couple guys like that. Now, not all jerkbaits are the same. As you can see here, I have a Smithwick Rogue here and a Lucky Craft pointer here. See how this Smithwick has a lot steeper bill and not nearly as big compared to this Lucky Craft that has a lot flatter bill and is quite larger. Now a Lucky Craft is going to give you super crazy erratic action when you're jerking that through the water. It's really good when you get into that 50 and 55 mid-range and that water's heating up and those shatters and bass are becoming a little bit more active. In the cold water 40 pre-spawn, you really want something like a Smithwick Rogue with that smaller bill. It's not going to be as erratic. It's going to be a lot tighter and a lot more subtle. Now, just like the crankbaits, you got to match the hatch with just not only colors, but the way that the shad are eating or shad are acting. So now with this jerkbait, it's not the funnest way to fish, but these things catch fish in the pre-spawn. You know, you're gonna jerk it, you reel it down, jerk it once or twice, and you're gonna have to, you let it sit. I usually let it sit for a good while. I'm not the most patient fisherman, and 15 seconds is usually a long time for me. But on Patoka this past weekend, I was talking to guys, and they were letting it sit for 45 seconds to a minute because these are suspending. Got to go suspending jerkbait this time of year, or even if it has a slow sink to it. But definitely don't want a floating jerkbait this time. You want that to suspend right where those bass are out and just sit there. And 30 seconds, 45 seconds, even a minute, and they'll come up and just engulf it. Jerkbait is an awesome pre-spawn cold water tactic. The second and probably my favorite way is with a good old-fashioned jig. So what I have here is I have an all-terrain rattling AT jig. You guys can see that. You know, same thing. You're gonna have to fish it really slow and on the bottom, depending on the terrain that I'm fishing. This all-terrain jig is incredible. It comes through any type of cover that you could want it to. You know, sometimes if I'm fishing a lot rockier, bluffy type of lake or wall or like ground, then I'm going to be fishing with a football head jig. But this all-terrain jig just about does it all. So I'm usually fishing this in about 3/8, ½ ounce type jig with, you know, kind of a more subtle trailer. You know, you want to really downsize this time of year. You know, the shad haven't had time to grow, the crawfish hasn't had time to like really expand, and everything's slow and methodical. So a subtle trailer, just slowly dragging that on the bottom. Usually I don't hop it because, you know, there's just not that much action when the water's that cold. So slowly drag it across the bottom and, you know, let it sit there for 10 seconds before you move it again, and just slowly drag that jig across the bottom. In the spring, some really good colors and jig. I usually like something with a lot of orange on it this time of year. Those crawfish and pre-spawn have that orange tint to them. So, you know, something here natural with a little red on it. You know, this is a green pumpkin, red flake type color here. That's really good in the pre-spawn. Black and blue is always a good color no matter what type of year. Jerk baits, chrome and blue, like this Smithwick Rogue here, chrome and blue, a chartreuse stripe on them, like this Lucky Craft pointer is a really good color. It's a little chartreuse with purple, and then and now in the crankbait colors, I'm gonna go with something that matches that crawl pattern. So like I said, they have that orange on them. So here's like this is a 3XD that I have, just orange belly crawl type color there. So try to match the hatch this time of year. Those are my 3 go-to baits. So when I get to the lake, I'm going to start off with that crankbait, find the active fish, find where the fish are at, and once I find those fish, I'm going to slow down and fish with that jerk bait and that jig. Okay, so I know this video is getting a little long, trying to cover the basics here. If you guys have any more questions about pre-spawn fishing, I could talk about this for hours, but I know these videos get kind of long and make it a little boring, but just kind of a quick rundown is you're going to find those staging areas where they're going to be spawning. Find the deep water closest to that spawning area. That's where they're going to be staging. When you get to the lake, pull out that crankbait, find those active fish. Once you find those active fish, slow down with a jig or a jerk bait. These fish are going to be suspended this time of year. You may be in 25 foot of water, but look at your electronics and see that those bass are in about 10 to 15 foot. So that jerk bait's awesome to get down in that depth range and just sit there right in front of their face. So if you guys have any more questions, please comment, inbox me, anything. I'd be happy to answer it. If you guys are confused on something or like me to go over something like a bait more in particular, or focus more in on one of the aspects that I talked about in this video, please let me know. If not, then hope you guys go out and have a good time in the pre-spawn. It can be one of the funnest times to fish, and it can also be one of the more frustrating because the spinning bass are one of the hardest bass to catch. So good fishing, you guys, and have a spawn video hopefully coming up here soon. So see you guys.
I don't belong here, we gotta move on.